This meeting is being called to order in the Wednesday, August 6th at 12:30 p.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a moment of silence, please, to reflect on the importance of our duties here as Selectmen. Thank you. In accordance to Mass General Law 30A, Section 20E, I have to ask if anyone other than the Board of Selectmen's office and LCAT is recording this meeting. Please. Okay, so that's noted. Okay, so we will carry on. At this point, there is an item to be added for consideration to be added to the agenda because of the time. If you'd like to give a little bit on that, Nick.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I appreciate bringing that up. I would ask the board to consider taking a matter up relative to the cable hearing that the board discussed last evening for the Form 394. There's been information that came up as a result of today's meeting of the Cable Advisory Committee, so I'd like to have the opportunity to report to the board and provide you with a couple of options relative to that hearing.
So there is a motion to have that added to the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
I just would wonder, so we'll just have to open back up to open session to do that?
Whichever would be the board's pleasure. You do have a...
Okay, because I think we need to take care of the first, okay. All right, so that's added to the agenda after the executive session. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the reputation, character, or physical condition or mental health rather than professional competency of an individual, or to discuss discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Selectman Gorman?
Yep.
Selectman Federici?
Yes.
Okay. We are now in executive session. We would ask that we're back in session. Nick, if you want to brief us on the cable hearing 394, please.
Sure. Thank you, and thanks to the board too for taking that vote for this matter to come up. Last night, the Board of Selectmen set a date for a 394 Form 394 hearing. This is the Comcast issue about their suitability and the board's consent or not consent for the transfer. Anyway, there was a Cable Advisory Committee meeting this morning, and as part of the regular agenda on that, the committee spoke with Mr. Cohan, Tom Cohan from Charter, about other matters, but also informed him of the date for that hearing, which the board said would be for August 15th, time to be determined. So Mr. Cohan indicated that he would not be able to attend, but Charter would send someone. But he also brought up the fact that there is a requirement for a 2-week notification for the hearing, which he then also said is possibly could be waived by Mass DTU. And then also, well, anyway, and then said, follow up on it as you will. In the interim, I have contacted Mass DTU, and they've given a couple of options. First, if the board wishes to continue and have the hearing on August 15th, then a request would need to be sent to Mass DTU for a request of the waiver of the notification requirement. In other words, we could still do at least 1 week's worth of ad instead of the 2 consecutive weeks. We could also get it on the LCAT television station. And they would be prepared. I spoke with Mr. Mail earlier today. The other option would be to contact Comcast and see if they would allow for a waiver of the 60-day requirement, which I know I brought up last night with counsel, and he advised against it. But with more information, DTU said if Comcast gave written assent, then they would consider that request. It would still need to go to DTU for them to give approval or consideration of that request. My question for the board here is, do you want to stick with the August 15th date and have me send in the request for the waiver of notification, or would the board want to consider an alternate date if Comcast assents to extending that 60-day deadline? So, if, for example, and I've sent a communication off to their representative asking if they would even consider it. And so I don't have a response at this time. Okay. So that's the issue before the board.
Okay, any thoughts? Attorney Donahue?
Well, I mean, the problem is that you're being asked to make a decision without a full set of information as to where you're going to go. If you knew that Comcast would assent to a waiver, then you can make a decision whether to go with Comcast or to ask the state to waive the time frame. Not knowing what Comcast's responses are going to be, and given the fact that you have to schedule your meetings in advance, I would suggest that you probably, the best course would be to ask, direct the administrator to send a letter to the state asking for a waiver of the 2-week notice requirement and to have the hearing on the 15th. And if you so disposed, also work with Comcast, have the administrator contact Comcast and say, we're requesting it for the 15th. If that's a problem for you and you'd like to have it on another day, send us a waiver of the requirements and we can reschedule it to accommodate the board and your needs. Otherwise, you got to pick one, and if you pick Comcast and Comcast says no, now you're down to almost the hearing date, supposedly, and you don't have any authority from the state to avoid the 60-day deadline that's there.
When you apply to the state, what's the turnaround for that?
I have no idea.
So we could apply to the, do you know, you're familiar? Okay.
Madam Chair, I asked that question, and Mr. Mayo indicated that if they got something, well, they would try and turn it around as quickly as possible, probably within a day or so.
Oh.
But we don't know how quickly Comcast will follow up, and I intend to give them based on the board's direction, intend to give them a follow-up telephone call this afternoon as well.
Okay. Selectman Federici, is there anything you'd like
Nope.
to say?
Nope.
Okay. Selectman Bowman?
Well, I think we should go along with Mr. Donahue's recommendation.
Okay. All right. All right, so then we will go along with Mr. Donahue's recommendation. We'll follow both prongs, sending a letter out to the state asking for the waiver of the 2-week notice, and also contact Comcast and ask them for the 60-day extension.
This would be an extension on that 60-day deadline. So to see how much leeway they would be willing to give. I would suggest that if they come back with an assent, that we could then send to the state that the board give the chairman and as the cable liaison some latitude as to looking at what the hearing date might be.
Okay.
If I might suggest, to make the process less uncertain, if the board had a date in mind that you would request Comcast to extend to, it might make it much easier for them to respond in a sooner window. So if you said we want to hold the hearing September 2nd, or whatever the date is, rather than just say, will you extend? And then you get into the issue of what's the extension going to be, and the board's going to have to get together to talk about that again. And it just expands the time you need to get a response.
Okay. Let me see your date.
And
See your calendar. Yeah.
And I will say that in the communication, I said to them, would you consider assenting to it? And then to what date, in between? What's the latest, basically, that you would do it? I understand what council's saying. If the board went in with a date, that would,
But you've already sent that letter?
I've already sent
that email?
communication.
No, it's just a suggestion.
Okay, so that email has already been sent, so now we'll just have to wait till it comes back. I mean, because to send another one would be repetitive, or do you think it's worthwhile to send another one with a date?
Assuming if the board were going to have it, if you were to schedule this as part of your next, not the next meeting, but the
The
meeting.
15th was the,
You
because it
only
was,
have the publication time to do it, so it would have to be probably the 2nd. That's your next meeting?
No, next meeting's the 19th.
19th, yeah.
So you really don't have enough time to get the 2 publications in anyway, so you'd have to get the waiver. And you get the waiver, you have a date scheduled now for the 15th, asking for the waiver. So if you were going to hold the hearing beyond the 60-day window, and you're asking Comcast to assent to the waiver of the time so you can get the state to agree to that ascension, would you want to schedule it as part of one of your normal meetings?
What do you think?
That's an option.
Okay.
Probably not the 19th, though.
No, not the 19th,
Yeah.
but I mean, you could
Okay.
say the next, so Nick could call Comcast and say, we sent this in, here's the date that we have in mind.
Okay, but the question that I have for you, our next meeting after the 19th is September 2nd, correct?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's after, isn't that after the 60 days?
Yes.
And so that's where the
So you-
problem lies.
Well, you
But we're-
need the assent
Extension.
from Comcast to the waiver,
Okay, but if they don't give that.
then you
we
hold
don't-
it on the 15th.
Then we
Because you've
hold it
already
on the
made the
15th.
request to
For the
the state for the waiver.
Okay, I thought you were saying not to go ahead for ask for the 2-week, and I just wanted to be sure that we had that. So it'll so if the 60-day assent comes in, then we can change the date on the 15th to a later date. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying probably if you get the extent, but if Comcast says they're going to extend, you could have Nick, even though he sent the letter, do a call as a follow-up to the letter saying, we sent you a letter asking for the extension. If you're willing to extend the 60-day, waive the 60-day period so that we can apply to the state for the extension, we're looking at holding it as part of the Selectmen's meeting on the 2nd.
Second, got it. Okay.
And if they say no, then you're back to holding it on the 15th.
Okay.
And I'd probably copy charter.
I did.
All right, so that, the motion is for us to ask both the state and, the state for a 2-week waiver, and then to Comcast for a 60-day extension. And then if the extension does come through with Comcast, then we'll have our hearing on September 2nd. If not, then we will carry through with the one on the 15th. That's the motion. It's
So
moved.
second.
And second, is there any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anything else before our board, before we close?
I don't know if there was anything out of executive.
I think I would want to speak with council before that would happen. Can I take a 5-minute break to confer
Sure.
with council?
Yep.
I'll entertain a motion to take a 5-minute break, just to
So moved.
refer to council.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Roll call. Ready? Done? Okay. We are back in session. After conferring with council, we will not revoke our vote, and everything will stay as it was that we voted yesterday. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Good night, gentlemen, or good evening, good afternoon.